subscribers to Tim Kirby Russia. You know, recently I got a unique offer to do sort of like a open format live interview with this pretty decently sized group of people called Off Grid Ireland. And they're all Irish people. Not all of them live off grid, but a pretty cool group of people. And it was actually one of the most enjoyable experiences I've ever had. And I think I covered a lot of really good material in this interview, so I decided to upload it to my channel. Of course, I've waited a few days so that way they get the primary views from this interview. It's theirs first, but I thought I'd share it with you now. But anyways, out of thanks, it would be amazing if you guys would take a listen to a couple of minutes, and then after that, go subscribe or follow or whatever you want to call it to Off Grid Ireland on Telegram and on YouTube, because I think you're going to like these guys, and I think you're going to like this interview if you enjoy my material. Anyways, let the interview begin.
Thanks for coming on, Tim. I'll just do you an introduction, Tim, and then we'll
Sure.
get into the meat. Down. Tim Kirby is an American political analyst and geopolitics commentator. He's living in Russia. He previously hosted a morning radio show for 5 years. He writes for Strategic Culture, and in his spare time he plays pro football with Moscow Spartans. And he has his own YouTube and Telegram channel, and I linked actually his Telegram channel on the main channel there. Welcome, Tim, to Off Grid Ireland. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much, and I have a strong feeling not many people want to hear a lot about American football, so let me tell you one thing real quick. November 20th from Sapsan Arena, the Russian Super Bowl is taking place, so maybe I can drop you guys a link later if any of you are interested. You can watch Russia's championship match where I will be the official English language voice because my old butt didn't make the starting lineup, so I'll be in the commentator's box. But anyways.
Yeah, good stuff. Definitely send us in the link and we'll share it around.
All right.
Good stuff. So just tell us a bit about yourself. How long are you living in Russia?
Well, I've been living in Russia since the end of 2006, which is over 15 years. Before that, I was a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer in Kazakhstan for 2 years. Kazakhstan is a lot like Russia in a lot of ways, very, very similar. And in fact, the northern half of Kazakhstan still primarily speaks Russian. So yes, I've been here a long time. In fact, pretty much my entire adult life, especially the mature part of my adult life. I work overall in the media and in political analysis, as you mentioned in the intro. I've got kids and all that. And I also do a lot of travel-related videos. As well. That's kind of my main gig that pays the bills. But yeah.
Good stuff. Just on current, I suppose it's been I think most people are interested in what's going on with the Ukraine crisis. We've got like 50,000 have come here. Like, our government is just, I don't know, you can imagine, you've probably seen some of the reports. The Irish government now wouldn't be they're on the naughty list, but it's the propaganda,
Well, it kind of depends. So you're talking about, there's the migration factor, and well, obviously, was this war avoidable? Yes, and when NATO and I should say the Western powers and all that, when they decided to finance and build up over many years the necessary ideological background to create the Maidan Revolution, which they did, and they succeeded. Well, they should have if they were worried about migrants, they should have expected some blowback, because it became pretty evident that after the Maidan that something was going to have to happen at some point, and here we are. But on the other hand, to be honest, when there's someone living in the Russian-speaking world, so we're going beyond just Russia. Then again, Ukraine has traditionally been a part of Russia, so that's another sort of point. But anyways, the territory of the former Soviet Union, I don't know. So many people have told me all over these years that I'm nuts for living in Russia, and that they would happily trade places with me to be in America. So to be honest, maybe they're all living the Western dream that all these people have been telling me about for all these years. So who knows? Do they seem happy to you?
No, no, no. You see, I think our government. I think is beholden, as you probably know, to Europe and to whatever, maybe even America's coattails.
Mm.
And the Irish people are just they got the they all have the flag up, the Ukrainian flag, and changed their social media profile to the little circles. I support Ukraine. It was like the COVID kind of psyop, or not psyop, but the campaign behind that, it just swept
Yeah.
through like, I support Ukraine. And it could have easily been I support Russia. It was just the decision from the top. The people just go with the wind, I think, in most of the West.
Yeah, this is kind of one of those things where I'm not the most well-read person in the world, but I can tell you that there's this guy called Nietzsche, or Nietzsche. I forget how to really pronounce it, the Germanic way, as it should be. And there's some good videos online where they describe this, but he kind of, I think he said there were four types of people and two groups. So like 2 by 2 is four. And anyways, unfortunately, this term, got manipulated by a very famous group of very, very bad people. So there's sort of the Übermenschen and the Untermenschen. He sort of divided people into groups. But what he was referring to wasn't some sort of goofy genetic stuff, but it was the Übermenschen was sort of the type of people who would be trying to live their destiny. And the Untermenschen would be the kind of people who are sort of nothing's trying to drag them down, very jealous, forever trying to lie their way into seeming like that they're successful or that they have value. In a lot of ways, I've watched that video about Nietzsche like 3 or 4 times, and I think that that's really this scenario with like this Ukraine thing. It's just sort of an excuse for sort of these sort of hateful Untermenschen type people to feel like they're accomplishing something, like they changed their icon on Facebook. They're the ones who are on the good side of morality. And I think that in a lot of ways, that big group of people exists in every society, and they are quite dumb and they are quite malleable, I guess would be the proper way to look at it. So you can't be too angry about it, because whatever the media pushes, I think that kind of person's just going to go for it. To an extent, there are definitely some things the media's tried that have failed, but this whole Ukraine thing, yeah, a lot of people in the West bought that hook, line, and sinker. There's also the factor of tribalism, and tribalism is the most understated factor in all politics. I think maybe to an extent with the rise of what they call the manosphere or red pill material, we're sort of seeing the dawn of people acknowledging how gender and sex can play a role in politics and the way that human society works for like the first time ever. You'd think we'd have discovered this before, but it seems to be a sort of recent awakening. But the awakening that hasn't happened at all yet is about tribalism, and human beings are very tribal. I'm sure for you guys over there, we have our American football. I don't know, but I'm sure when we get our Gaelic football going, one team's wearing yellow, the other team is wearing red, and that's all that it takes for after the match to get in a fist fight. We can see elements of tribalism in school as cliques form with nations, within religions. We have a lot of tribes that make up all of us, okay? And this tribalism factor probably came into play with the Ukrainian crisis because this mass of people who aren't very, let's put it this way, savvy. For them, there's a certain glee in this tribalism, a certain, masturbatory satisfaction that they can get from feeling that the West is under attack, and the Ukrainians, because they're on our side, they're part of our team and they want to be with us, so they're the good guys, and the other side is all the bad guys. If we look back at history, there's a lot of people who make things look very black and white, and this tribalism and this inherent desire to sort of break into these groups and fight each other is very, very powerful with us human beings. And I think that that's also a perfect example of that. So I think I have sort of two theories as to why that happened that I just mentioned.
Actually, on this, I done a bit of, I watched one of your podcasts there on YouTube, and it's quite fascinating. Actually, I shared it on the channel because a lot of
Much
people
appreciated. Sharing is caring, my friend.
Sharing is caring, but it's the one that everyone was struggling with, and it's a very good podcast. That's the Zelensky, he's Jewish basically, and we all seen these Azov brigades, and like they're not just and I think you said it in the podcast. They're not these aren't neo Nazis. Like they're not neo anything. Like they're real they're real life descended from actual Nazis, and it was interesting the interplay because it does boggle people's minds that it's because of who Zelensky is and the fact then that he could be commanding these real Nazis. Do you know what I mean? So it was interesting. Can you tell us stuff about that?
Well, that's always a very touchy sort of subject there. But one of the reasons why this all I should say succeeded from the standpoint of certain people in Washington who want to see Russia suffer or be castrated in some ways. For them, Ukraine was a success, whereas all these efforts to create some sort of similar situation in Kazakhstan or Moldova or the Baltic states or wherever have been vastly less successful is because in Ukraine they did have this history of the Ukrainian, what was it, UPA? What would that be in English? Oh my God. I don't remember. But anyways, the Ukrainians who fought for the Nazis, they have that legacy going back, especially to their overall hero, Mr. Bandera. And that legacy was something real. And because it was something real and tangible, I think that they were able to sort of hook into that. Whereas, yeah, there's been, especially recently, some anti-Russian acts of blatant racism and what people would call hate crimes. In Kazakhstan, that certainly happened. That's happened in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and basically everywhere. But they sort of remain like one-off things. They haven't been able to turn into like a political movement because only Ukraine, Western Ukraine, had that particular legacy. Now about Zelensky himself. Well, it's one of the things where we have to sort of look at things about the way that people behave and what their ideology is based on. So if we go back to the ideology of fascism, they're essentially saying that in their system there is this one, like the subject, that's the proper term, the subject of their system is a particular race or ethnicity, right? In the world, in the fantasy universe of Warhammer 40,000, it's considered a techno-fascist empire of the future because humanity basically fights against all aliens, and the more that people mutate and become less human, they're killed off, as are aliens. So that would be a good fantasy example of someone having a very fascistic attitude, that we're all human. Anything that's not human or less human needs to be destroyed or is garbage or otherwise. That's a fantasy example. And we also the real life example, which was in Nazi Germany, right, where they put the Germans up first, and then Jews and Slavs and Gypsies and so on and so forth were part of the undesirable group. You'll also note that in every political system of a modern political system, so with fascism, the enemy is these different racial or ethnic groups that are not part of the subject group. With communism, it is anyone who is not part of the working class, and they're free to be killed. And with liberalism, it's essentially anyone who's not liberal. So especially the old monarchs of Europe were free to be killed, like in the French Revolution. So all of us are guilty of some extremism, regardless of our political belief system. But anyways, back to fascism. So you'll see that Zionism as an ideology very much lines up with this whole fascist concept, because there is a certain particular religious or ethnic group, wherever you want to consider them, and they are the good people. They are the people who are the subject of the system, and everyone who is not, especially on the territory of Israel or the greater Israel, is not. So basically, that sort of methodology and way of thinking is not too far away or too different, or maybe even different at all from the way that someone with a outspoken Zionist worldview has. So perhaps that could also explain it. There's also the factor where in politics you'll see there's a weird attitude of we'll get them later. Now, what is we'll get them later? That is how very often groups like ISIS, who are hardcore Muslims, will sometimes work for the interests of like U.S. foreign policy, and you'd wonder, but why? There are these conservative Muslims. Look at the West, because they want power now, and if the U.S. is going to help them get to power, that's awesome. We'll deal with them later. We'll get them later. First thing is to get their Islamic State going, and then they can worry about it. And I think that might be part of where they get all of these Slavic young men to serve non-Slavic masters. I think that might be sort of part of it, why all these groups are into it. There's also a question of funding. Some people are just in it for the cash.
Those groups, would you think they were cultivated? Like, were they, like, and I think you said this in your thing, that they have been, it's a brand of nationalism that they are after been propagated with, that's anti-Russian. And they've made some kind of agreement or ceasefire with the Zionists in some way, make, shape, or form. I don't know. I think that's what I got from what you said. And then, and that most of the oligarchs in Ukraine that are Zionists, and they were they made their move after the coup in 2014. Like, I think that's been it is fascinating there, like, what's going on, you know.
Yeah, well, it's kind of hard to really understand what's going on with them. You guys should take a listen to my interview with a man, he's codename Afanasi, where he really discussed how he believes that there is a sort of greater conspiracy that they, because of the Khazar, or in Russian Khazar, people who used to live in Ukraine, who had a sort of Jewish elite back, and this is in back before almost, well, it wouldn't be back before writing for them because they had writing. Well, back before really anything in Ukraine was anything, in ancient times, like over 1,000 years ago, that there's some sort of desire within his opinion. There's some sort of desire within Ukrainian sort of elite that is Zionist to sort of recreate that, because essentially anywhere that they've been, it means that God gave that land to them or something, or so on. I think also we can't forget that in a lot of ways the Ukrainian elite is corrupt and inept, but secondly, they found themselves between a real rock and a hard place, because one thing that Brzezinski was very good at pointing out in his books is that Russia without Ukraine is not nearly as strong, and that Ukraine could be a real sort of pivot point to punish the Russians. So I think in a lot of ways, it wasn't so much that these oligarchs woke up one day and they were like, yeah, it's Zionism time, we'll get those Goy or whatever. It was more that since 1991, the West, especially like Washington and all that, have been really putting a lot of push and a lot of effort into transforming Ukraine. And I think those oligarchs kind of smelled the way the wind was blowing, or they felt the way the wind was blowing. I've heard there's a term called windsock politicians, like whichever way the wind blows, that's the way the windsock faces. And that's I think that might be actually a very sort of large part of it, or it could have worked out to be sort of a combination of the two, or whatever. But the only thing I can tell you is that many of the Ukrainian oligarchs, whereas in Dmitry Medvedev's presidency, they banned all mercenary groups in Russia, except for the Wagner group for whatever reason, but that occurred later. While Russia got rid of all mercenaries and private armies, in Ukraine, they were just being born. And everyone who was everyone had their own private army, filled with people who had, again, traced their roots and heritage back to this Banderite, neo-Nazi sort of legacy there. But we also have to remember that within that group of extremists, there are plenty of people who are not even Ukrainian. There are plenty of Georgians. There are Jews, apparently. There are various foreigners of all different types and shapes and colors, so on and so forth. We have to remember that right now in our sort of battle for the future, World War III sort of started, unfortunately, but in our soft World War III, everyone is sort of being forced to pick a side. And so a lot of people, like I mentioned, the Georgians, it doesn't mean that everyone in Georgia is on the Ukrainian side, but the ones who really want Abkhazia and South Ossetia back sure are, you see. So, yeah, it's a complex puzzle.
Yeah, definitely. And it's seems to be escalating, and there's no kind of talk of peace. And I seen it at the weekend. There was it was the New York Times or someone released a piece, and it's like, oh, we should pretend that we're looking for peace. Did you see that? And then they're all in unison going on, like there's Zelensky coming out like, well, I am prepared for negotiations, but it's like it's it's just ridiculous what's going on. Like that.
Well, yeah, and I mean this and this is sort of like and sort of trying to vie for peace now. I mean, it's like, come on. I mean, there have been so many opportunities. We have to remember that at the beginning of January, for anyone who's watched my channel, forgive me for repeating myself. I've mentioned this a lot of times, but it's an important point that the Russians sort of sent Washington this sort of overall package of how they thought that they could sort of redraw European security. This was like January 1st of this year, so 2022. And by the end, by January 10th, I believe, Washington rejected every one of their points, just a complete universal rejection of their plans of how they could sort of, where they could put NATO, where everyone could put missiles, and how we could sort of live in peace. And they rejected all of it. And after that point where it's like, okay, so you're not going to acknowledge, and they sort of also underlined basically that, like, look, you punk bitches, there's a global hegemon and you ain't it, motherfucker. That's kind of the attitude that they really sent. And it was like, okay. So in a lot of ways, although it might sound cute, that like, okay, maybe we could have negotiations. The people on the Russian side have to understand that there's plenty of time for negotiations. They, in fact, wanted to open a dialogue about how to do European security before this war started. And NATO, and the problem is, they're not really sure who pushed for it, whether it be the Biden clan, whether it be the Pentagon, whether it be some sort of more NATO or whoever. They opened the dialogue before this happened, and now there is sort of, especially from the Russian standpoint, there's really nothing to negotiate unless Washington, especially this is the other thing. If Washington wanted to end the war now, okay, what would they need to do? They would have to essentially send the Russians pretty much the signal of, okay, we're going to pull out of all the territory where most of the people consider themselves to be ethnic Russians. We are going to make Ukraine a eternally neutral state, because basically that's what the Russians want. So Ukraine is eternally neutral. They cannot have any NATO forces or NATO goodies on their territory, and they sacrifice legally and forever and for all time all the regions that are pro-Russian. Or they could do some sort of very hotly contested referendum. I'll put it that way. I don't think that process would go very well, but something like that. That's what the Russians want. And anything below that, they're not going to accept. It's too late. And you have to also remember that Russia kind of didn't really want to fight this war. So I think that they probably would have taken a lot less. In fact, the real irony of this is, say the West would have, in 2014, before the Maidan, say the Maidan wouldn't have happened. Well, Yanukovych wasn't popular. The United States has fantastic PR. To be honest, they could have got someone like a Poroshenko or a Yatsenyuk, or even, who knows, a Zelensky. Well, Zelensky took time to prep. But they could have got someone of that ilk into power just with time, if they could have just waited. Because, yeah, maybe Yanukovych was going to make some deals about joining the Eurasian Union or something, economic union, blah, 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 blah. All that can be undone. With enough all that, and they would have been able to keep all of Ukraine, including Crimea. Then comes, the 2014, so they lose because they refuse to wait. They lose the Crimea. Oh, okay, then what do? Rather than just sort of like take Ukraine, sit there, maybe do their biolab thing, maybe get some nice missiles in the right places, do everything real quiet. No, they have to go and violently put down uprisings in the East, and they have to do the whole Nazi thing and kill local people and torture everyone and try to do something like how the Zionists like to clear out territory of the Palestinians, right? So they had to do that. And because of that, they've already lost 4 more states. And they keep fucking going. You see what I mean? It's unbelievable. If they would have done nothing would have yielded the best result.
It's absolutely self-destructive. self-destructive,
Yeah.
and I think that like it's the Americans are prepared to fight to the last Ukrainian, like because it seems this will be over without Western support, and there's no doubt about that. Like it's been
Well,
prolonged by the West.
that my friend, that seems to be the case. And about the last Ukrainian, one thing that we also have to kind of note is, it's hard to really believe a lot of numbers. And anytime you hear a number, be it from a Russian source, be it from a supposedly neutral source, be it from a mainstream media source, we always have to be careful about numbers. But it kind of almost looks like the Ukrainian army might be running out of people with Ukrainian citizenship. I think that the amount of foreign mercenaries who actually really aren't mercenaries is growing every day. So it's kind of a question of who exactly is fighting over there, So that's something else.
Yeah, we had an Irish guy killed over there. He's 24 years of age or something. It's absolutely ridiculous. Well, it reminds me of what went on in Syria. These people are radicalized. These are being radicalized by our own state media and our own, mainstream media. Like, it's what the 24-year-old Irish dude doing over there getting killed. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like what went on in Syria, a jihad.
Well, yeah. Well, the question is did he go there for ideological reasons, or was he one of those weird people who want to go on a human safari? Because one thing we have to acknowledge, there's a lot of things. We can't live in a fantasy world that there are people who are, I don't know, is sociopathic the right term? Basically, there are people out there who it's their dream to go around and murder people, but they're too cowardly or they don't want to take the risk. And so most of the initial mercenaries from the West who went into Ukraine were the guys that they were going to be able to go there and just kill whoever they want. That's what the real attractive thing was, the ability to murder civilians and these hapless Russian soldiers and have that sort of Call of Duty thing. So, there's definitely a certain sick side to this that we can't remember, but it's a sick side that exists in every society on Earth. So it's something to be aware of. There's in Ireland, I don't know how many people you got in Ireland overall. How many millions?
5, I think, nearly 6 with the North.
Well, then I bet it'd be pretty easy to find maybe 5 or 10,000 people who'd love to just go out and just kill people just for fun. So, I mean, you could create, all it takes is like 1/10 of 1%, and that's the people who went there. But we have to remember the initial mercenaries who went to to Ukraine, they were given sort of like magazines with 10 rounds in them and like no guns and told to go to the front. And now all of a sudden, late in the war, when Ukraine's running out of stuff, all the mercenaries are very well equipped. It's almost as if they're not mercenaries, but NATO's standing army in different uniforms. It's not a fact, but it's kind of feels like it might be the truth.
No doubt. Like the Russians, like I think I'd say both sides have taken a lot of casualties. I don't know it. I've just watched some of the Russian channels here on this and that. Like it's carnage what's going on. Like it is heartbreaking for all involved. You know what I mean? It's a pity. But it's definitely been prolonged by what I think is the NATO funding and also NATO intelligence, because they're probably, you know what I mean, they're giving them. I think Russia's up against NATO really in Ukraine. In my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, at this point, we kind of don't know what's going on, but all we can hope is that something will change soon. The sort of Scott Ritter or Colonel McGregor, who I share a lot of their materials, they're kind of more convinced that once the ground gets nice and hard, the Russians might make a move. I'm not even sure. I think that so far this war has gone real well for Russia by just sitting and shooting. I'm not sure if they're going to advance. But I'm not a military strategist, especially for modern warfare. If we had Napoleonic miniatures on a table, perhaps I could be more of assistance. But that's not the case. So,
do you know anything about the biolabs? I think I seen. Was it confirmed? Like evidence found that they were working on like.
Oh well, here I'm gonna have to. Then this one. This is a big one. Hold on, I'm gonna have to go to my channel here, and we're gonna have to find. Hold on, Tim Kirby Bio Labs, because that is. I have a whole interview with a gentleman, and I will send that to your PR friend there, with a gentleman, and she can share that with the group, who is a guy I've known for a long time. And basically, he started to put together. This is before the biolab thing was exposed. Okay, this was before you've ever heard about it. He goes up to me and he's like, I see you're kind of doing this like whole like channel on YouTube and Rumble and all that, dude. I got some information for you. And he sort of laid out this thing where he's like, yeah, they're creating these diseases. There's this biolab stuff. And I was like, well, man, how about you show me the evidence for it? And this guy laid out to me, and he didn't look to be the Photoshop god, a lot of information, a lot of receipts, a lot of documents, a lot of basically the Pentagon funding. I think it was like 15 or so biolabs all across the territory of Ukraine. And, because Ukraine is an extremely impoverished country, not to say that Russia's the richest place. This isn't a bash on Ukraine because, again, Ukraine historically has been a part of Russia. So that would be like, as an American, bashing on, Texas and Tennessee and, Maine as being the bad guys or something, three random states very far separated, So this isn't to say that the Ukrainians are bad because they're essentially us. But there's a lot of corruption there and there's a lot of poverty. Okay. And so they were apparently paying impoverished people to experiment on them, which is absolute evil. That is satanic. That is like the kind of stuff that happens in the vault experiments of the Fallout video game series. And anyways, so he, in this interview you guys can watch later, sort of lays it out. He's one of the first people who exposed it, and he contacted me because he knows me. So will I be able to do so much super ultra revealing investigative work in the future? Probably not, but who knows? But that's an interview that I'm particularly proud of because literally it is the first place anyone heard of the biolab thing. So I'm happy to be still breathing. I'm surprised I didn't get shot for that one.
Yeah, I'd say you're not very popular maybe at home somehow or other.
No, not a lot.
Patrick Lancaster as well. I follow some of his stuff, and the same. It's the people calling for him to be struck from the air on Twitter, it's ridiculous.
I don't know, man. All I can tell you is I still went to a high school in a poor black neighborhood in the United States. We didn't have money. All the books were beat up and all that. But you know what? Well, I guess maybe one difference is I was sort of in the advanced placement class for a lot of the history-related stuff, but whatever. All this stuff about the Constitution, they explained it to us. All of these concepts about, having some tolerance for other people's positions and that we should hear each other out and, about discussion and the whole, I may not agree with what you say, but I'll defend you to the death your right to say it. All that shit they told us, man. The mentality that created the Enlightenment and all these values, we got it in school, and yet no one believes in it or understands it. It's amazing. I don't know. Maybe other schools were different. So it's infinitely frustrating how people can claim that they're on some sort of fight for freedom and justice when they just want to shut people down rather than providing a nice counter argument or saying you're wrong. So I know some people are also continuing research on that. If you look up John Mark Dugan, he told me there's some new revelations in the Biolab network story, but I think he's probably already exposed those, but he can tell you because they're his revelations, not mine.
But working on genetic diseases that would affect Slavs, I don't know, that's scary stuff.
And would it also remember, these people do not give a shit about the United States. That would have killed millions of Americans as well. And also the same thing in China, same biolab network. And that's why the Chinese, as soon as they sort of figured that out with COVID, their tune changed. That was when the real sort of, I think, alliance with Russia really became finalized, that they're going to work together because the Chinese Communist Party is angry. They are seeing red in many ways.
I can see that the iPhone delivery is being delayed. They've locked down the Foxconn or something, the factory there. And in the back of my mind, I know, look, it could be genuinely there's an outbreak, but in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, are China now beginning to, do little disruptions like that? You know what I mean? And now the iPhones are delayed because there's stuff in the background going on over semiconductors and Taiwan, and there's all sorts of things going on over there as well. The
Well, we
Americans are like,
obviously, if it is true, because again, just because I feel something's true doesn't make it true. If it is true that they did the biolab thing to try to exterminate the Chinese, or at least kill enough of them to break their society or create some sort of regime change, well, then we can expect they're going to do some stuff that's kind of shady or vengeful in return. So, is it possible that this iPhone thing is related to vengeance? Maybe. Maybe it could just be a deficit of parts. I really don't know, man. You might have to talk to someone who's a real expert on manufacturing, but that is not me.
good stuff. So back to Russia, like, and the energy situation and the Nord Stream and all of that. Like, is there much inflation in Russia at the moment? Like in Ireland now, in places like our energy is going through the roof, and cost of living, price of food, and everything is.
No, the inflation of the actual ruble. Well, Russia did experience inflation at the start of the war. I think it's sort of leveled off to maybe like a 10% inflation. It's going to wind up being that. But you have to remember, when you compare like a chart of like currencies in 2022, the ruble is like the strongest because everywhere else sank. The dollar sort of recovered now that Europe has been crippled, and Europe is going to be dependent on gas and stuff from fracking within the United States and all those other goodies. So in a lot of ways, the dollar's gotten a little bit, at least temporarily, stronger due to Europe's submission. So I don't know. I can tell you one thing that is a parent of two, and that's not that many kids. Yeah, it definitely hurts the pocket. Like, food's gotten more expensive. Food has definitely gotten more expensive. That's the one thing that hurts me. But the one thing that might even sort of shock your viewers is things I forget, like how cheap cell phone service is. So, like, I'm on a plan that is, I don't know, what is it, like 17, 18, 20, let's just say US dollars, like, or 20 euros or something. And it's 4 phones and cable TV, which we don't use, and the internet, like the home internet, for $20 a month, 4 phones, unlimited. Electricity costs like nothing. My bill here for utilities is let's see what I pay. What was it, like? Let's say maybe 6,000 rubles to dollars. A little less than $100 a month on all utilities for the rental apartment in Moscow. In Chekhov, especially during the summer, for electricity and all that, when I'm with the kids and they're living there, I mean, we're literally paying like $30, $50 for electricity and all that. So yeah, things like that are real cheap here, yeah, and which is nice. Because salaries in Russia suck, unfortunately. But if you can bring money from the West, life's good.
What's it like to integrate over there? Like, is it as a foreign in a foreign land? Like, are they welcoming, like, when you first arrive, or is it take a bit of adjustment?
Well, here's the problem. My last name is very misleading because all my ancestors came from Eastern Europe, so I kind of look like people do here, or at least the majority of people. So as long as my mouth is shut, no one really knows where I'm from. Integrating. You're also, one of the other problems with that too is I'm kind of a weirdo loner. People on the internet like to create fancy terms for that, like Sigma male. But to be honest, I'm just kind of a weirdo who lives in the woods, man. So, yeah, I guess maybe people in Russia are a little bit easier to deal with on some sort of interpersonal relationship. But like, I don't know, if you're someone who your life revolves around a lot of human contact and you're very extroverted and you really want to have like close friends, like the kind of friends that would, go to your funeral when you're an old man or something. That's just not the person I am, so it kind of doesn't really, apply to me, very much. But the main challenge you really face is learning the language, because if you don't speak Russian well, then you're in one category. If you speak Russian very well, you're really in a different category and you live in a completely different reality. Because as soon as I started to speak Russian like well, then all of a sudden you're a little bit more invited into the group, although you'll always be a foreign person.
That's fair. That's fair. I suppose that's the
Well,
same
like I tell
everywhere,
you,
really, isn't it?
dude, I don't like to mislead people because the problem is like I do meet a lot of people want to move to Russia who are these like super social like guys. You know, they're on their Tinder, they want to date like a new girl every day, and they just want to meet people and they want to go to concerts. I'm like, and I just want to be left the hell alone. I want to be in the woods with my thoughts and my beer and you know I don't know, man. After all these years of especially working in the media and having to deal with a lot of people, to be honest, I like dealing with concrete, wood, steel, things that you can turn into stuff that don't talk back when they don't have feelings. You know what I mean? So I'm a little bit overwhelmed by communication. So I'm different that way.
You sound like you're living well over there. Sounds like you're living the dream, living up.
Oh
That's what you
yeah.
want to be out away from
Well,
civilization and
Well, yeah, well, I see you're called Off Grid Ireland, and I've actually, unfortunately, I don't remember the names of the channels, but I've seen that apparently in Ireland, you guys have, well, from the way they portray it on YouTube, it would seem that possibly you guys have this trend where a lot of people or certain people are buying like old sort of farmhouses in Ireland that are, you know, very small in terms of square footage or meterage. Is meterage a word? I don't know, square meterage. It's a word now. And like, because they're made of like stone and stuff, mostly stone and mortar, and they're like fixing them up and kind of like living by themselves, you know, far away from the city. Is that true? Is that like a thing? Is that what Off Grid Ireland is?
well, we kind of have that in mind. Yeah, we do. We don't share as much of that kind of stuff anymore, but that is what originally because we set it up in the beginning of the pandemic and everything, and it was kind of like it was like I think a lot of people were wanting to get back to homesteading, and even now we kind of recommend everyone to be prepared and have food, a few months worth of
Yeah.
food supply stored and alternative heat sources and everything because I think it's uncertain times that we're in, and practical stuff like canning food and all that kind of type of stuff is no load to carry now in the times we're living in.
Uh, yeah, yeah. Well, one thing I would definitely say is, well, I don't know about you guys because it's weird because with the West, you know, you have these property taxes that just kill you. You have the costs, so they're doing everything they can to make living in homes hard. But it's kind of the way to live, man. Because when I was here during COVID, I was just sort of out at the house with the kids, and I was like, nothing happened. Working a little bit from home, not doing anything. Good times, man. And I'd recommend that everyone goes to gets the house. Obviously, I'm still on the electric grid. That makes life a lot easier. But I know a couple people in Russia who aren't, and they're pretty happy with it. And that style of living here is way easier to do than in say America, because in America everything is brutally regulated. Everything, everywhere.
It's really bad here as well. It's the nanny state they call it. Everything's regulated and monitored. Um,
Yeah.
just wanted to ask you if some of our listeners would be interested. Maybe you might know, and you might know. A lot of people say about Putin, like, oh, he's in. They're all in it together. All the leaders, like it's all orchestrated, and because what was happening in Ukraine is there wasn't like what the US did in Iraq and went in with the shock and awe and absolutely leveled the place. It was like as you were trying, what you espoused and what you were saying is the truth is that Russia sees Ukraine as nearly part of its own territory. They're brothers
Yeah.
nations, and that's why we didn't see wanton destruction. So, well, there is wanton destruction, but not. He didn't level Ukraine. Like
Yeah.
people couldn't understand how Zelensky was had Bono in the underground in Kiev. This kind of thing, and they were thinking, oh, it's all orchestrated. But like, what's your thoughts on, and also on the World Economic Forum to say that, oh, Putin, he's involved with the World Economic Forum. What's your thoughts on those?
Well, I'll put it this way: if all the world leaders are in on it, okay, they're in on some sort of conspiracy, you could debate that. Then we've lost. Then life is over. Everything is hopeless. And it's time to, I don't know, uh, end your life or ride it out or something like that. Now, the question is, if they're all in on it, what is their objective? So we have, Putin and Xi and Biden and all this. All the elections are fake. There are no political movements. What's the point of this? Where's it going? So what is their overall vision of where this cabal is taking the world? That's my question to you guys.
Well, no, listen, I don't think I think there was a lot of lockstep that went on at the beginning of the pandemic, and I think that's where people are getting it from. It's like you'd see them all working in tandem across the West and I suppose most of the world, and I think it's the optics then of the way the war in Ukraine went, because it was a completely different strategy to what we've seen in any other war that the West has been involved in. Like, it's a completely different strategy what Russia went through. I know maybe they made a misstep in the beginning, and
here's something about that, about the global pandemic. When you're, let's just say, you're a politician, right? And you're in Ireland. Okay. I believe you guys have counties as your smaller political division, if memory serves me correct. So let's just say you're what would that be then? Mayor, governor, count? Who's the leader of a county in Ireland?
Well, you'd have a county council. And then the TDs, they'd be like your senators there, or like your member of parliament or whatever to represent.
Oh, okay. So some kind of like MP kind of guy. Okay, so we'll say that. So, anyways, this person MP will say that they are against the COVID measures. But what if they stand up and go and say, right publicly, COVID is a lie. I'm going to fight against this. We're not going to do any vaccinations. What is going to happen? Their political career is over, because the machine is going to turn on them and say, you're harming people. You're killing people. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. Da, 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 da. What do you actually do? You do Oskar Schindler style. You sit there and go, yeah, we are facing a real national problem. And I guess that we're going to have to, in a proper way, implement some measures in order to protect the people, and you barely do any of it. You sit there. There's a new expression called quiet quitting, where you basically just do nothing at your job till you get fired. You quiet quit. You Oskar Schindler it. You do not try. You know you're doing something evil, and you are going to make sure that you're grinding this bureaucratic process and not doing anything correctly. That's what you actually are going to try to do. And very, very interestingly, Russia really never implemented that much COVID stuff, and they never made vaccines mandatory, because you'll never catch Putin saying that vaccines are or will be mandatory. And then all of a sudden, when the special military operation starts and the Russians break away from the world global system, all of a sudden, everything related to COVID vanishes. How interesting is that? What a coincidence.
Exactly, and that's what a lot of people, it went straight from one big operation to another, with the Ukraine flags here in Ireland and the whole lot.
And if you guys hear from certain questionable sources that don't like me very much at all, that they vaccinate the soldiers, that is not true, and I have debunked that on my channel, Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore. I'm speaking from the channel right now. You can join up, and maybe you should look for things like COVID, but that whole thing has been debunked completely. It was a lie. That's lies coming from Georgia, we'll call them.
Yeah, no, that debunked it, and it's definitely fascinating that it really is it's a crazy situation. And what we touched on earlier with the Zionist, the Greater Israel thing, I put that your video, your documentary, it's on the channel there. If anyone that's listening wants to watch it later on, it's really worth watching, because that's a lot of questions, because we've seen all the tattoos, the swastikas, the rings, it's hilarious, right? It seems that the Western media cannot take a shot of anything in Ukraine without accidentally picking up a swastika. Like, literally, the BBC, every time they try and just take a picture, someone has a swastika or a tattoo or a ring or an earring, or every time.
Well, it's a big part of it. And we also have to remember that for some of your listeners who may be considering paganism, this isn't an argument for Christianity, but it's an argument against paganism. Is generally A lot of these neo-Nazi groups also are very into both paganism and Satanism at the same time. How that works when Satan comes from a monotheistic religion as a concept, how that works, but they don't care. But essentially, they all want to. One of the problems that the Nazis also had overall mentally was they wanted to get away from a religion that tells them no to a religion that lets them do whatever the hell they want. And that's where we get into these problems of, I can even say one thing that's maybe become one of the defining features of these guys is the fucking cannibalism. Like, and not even just like directly, sometimes even directly, but like making food at restaurants like named after the children of the Donbass and like dead guy armed shaped cakes, this obsession with eating corpses of the Russian troops. It's just too far. And it just they keep doing it. So what you're also looking at is not only is there this link to the past, there's this weird sort of potentially Zionist aspect to things, but there's also a pagan satanic aspect to these guys that also can't be ignored, which is ironic because in a lot of ways they claim to be like that they're the superior Aryan race, even though we have to remember that according to Hitler, all Slavs are subhuman. So they apparently like I don't know quite how they don't understand that they're actually in the Aryan caste system. They are the untouchables along with me. But also, who else would be the untouchables in that system? Africans. And a lot of this like obsession with like magic rituals and either to pretending or actually possibly consuming the enemy is also very like African tribal warfare. So it's very bizarre. It's truly what we're seeing is something that's truly bizarre, truly evil. How these guys can go out there that they're somehow part of this like master race, but then they behave on the same level as like tribal people. And this isn't a dig on Africa. I know a ton of people from Africa. I said like tribal people who are,
it's savage.
I wasn't saying like I wasn't saying like my one buddy who's big in the mineral business in Nigeria. I wasn't comparing him to him. That guy knows a million things more about business than I'll ever know. You know what I mean? Or one guy I went to from high school, one of the black kids. He broke me, man, because I was hoping I'd be the most famous person to ever come from my shitty high school. He worked and designed one of the lunar, like, or not lunar, the Mars rover things. That bastard. So his name is he's like one of the bigwigs at NASA now, son of a bitch. So this wasn't a dig on black people. It was a dig on tribal voodoo bizarro religion.
And just on that, because it is the thing is, and it's a lot of people on this that they like the history and what went on, like, and this, like, to say go back to the oligarchs there, that the Zionist oligarchs, like they're the same race. They come from that region, the same as maybe these Banderites. Like they're the same. They're of the same stock. Isn't that what's going on, or is there different tribes within like
it depends. It depends on how you look at things. Like, I had a college roommate who was Jewish, and he never was like, well, I'm a different type of person than you. I think he, maybe officially in some sort of historical sense, he was Jewish, but I never really felt that he was a white American guy, and I was also a white American guy. Okay. Like, it depends on how you see your own identity. And, do people like Mr. Kolomoisky, the most famous Ukrainian oligarch to fund neo-Nazi groups, does he see himself as this Ukrainian person who happens to be Jewish, or does he see himself as being Jewish and these other people around him are just subhumans? I'm going to vote for the latter, but I could be wrong. We don't really know what's inside his head, but it sort of depends. All of us really, in a lot of ways, have a choice of how we view ourselves ethnically, you know what I mean? Because I mentioned that I and my buddy saw ourselves as white American. Well, why don't we see ourselves as just American? That's one thing that's very frustrating about the United States is all this racial shit. Like, because if you think about it, my ancestors came to America shortly, like kind of during and shortly after World War I. So my ancestors, like, came way after the ancestors of all the black people I grew up with. So in a lot of ways, they're way more American than my ass is, but they're only African American. We always have to, for some reason, make some sort of verbal distinction, even though they've been there since, before 1820, proven fact. So very frustrating. But anyways, it's sort of a question of identity, and that would sort of go to the oligarchs themselves and whether they see themselves as being a Ukrainian who has this Jewish background, or whether they see themselves as the part of this Jewish Zionist.
But they were saying some of them have like 3 passports or something. Was it on that podcast I was listening to, where they weren't allowed to have 2 dual citizenships, so they went and got a third? That have got
a lot of the rich guys here.
Yeah.
Well, of course, a lot of the rich guys, both in Russia and there. In fact, it was revealed online recently. Don't quote me on this because I'm not sure if it's quite true, but it probably is. In fact, I expected this to be worse. That of the top 100 wealthiest Russians, 40 have dual citizenship or more. Okay? I actually thought it'd be closer to like 80, to be honest. So that's actually probably a good trend because they're trying to make it so that way, basically, if you have dual citizenship, especially in the government, you can't do anything. You can't be governor, can't be president. I think you can't be in the Duma anymore. You can't do anything. So that's a good step in the right direction. But a lot of the oligarchs of the entire former Soviet Union all immediately have, American, British, Israeli citizenship, maybe Monaco, Cyprus. But I would say the big, triad is, of course, USA, England, Israel. Those are like the super triad with, like I said, then Monaco and Cyprus being occasional or something. Because I believe you can just throw money at Cyprus and get citizenship. I think it's like $5 million or something. And if you're oligarch rich, you could afford $5 million as a plan B. The weather in Cyprus is mostly lovely. I've been there. It's very dry. It's nice.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, so I suppose we'll just take a few questions then off people, if you don't mind, Tim.
Yeah, how about we take a few questions, but I think my voice will blow out in 30 minutes. I only got about 90 minutes of talking in me, so. All right.
It's all good. We mightn't use up that much time. Patricia, do you have a question there?
Gavin, I've just 2 cheeky questions to ask Tim there, if he doesn't mind. The first question is kind of one as a mother and as something that kind of is really kind of bugging me as far as the Ukraine conflict over there. I see on several occasions there has been exchange of POWs, and the Russian government are handing over Azov prisoners, and they seem to be very happy. They're medically looked after. They're well fed. They seem to be in great shape. And then the returned prisoners, the Russian prisoners of war, are returning. They're mutilated. They're banged up. They're absolutely in a heap. And I'm sure the families of those Russian soldiers must be baying for blood, and it must really irk them to see how the POW has been returned are in such good health, and how their government is so restrained.
Okay, let me handle this first. Let me handle this first topic because unfortunately I don't have enough RAM in the system here to remember a second question. Okay, so about this topic. Now, going back, one thing that people have accused Russia of is that like Russia for this war was going to need some kind of like false flag event to like do something or up the ante and like start this war or go to another level. And that is the dumbest reasoning from the West ever, because Russians have seen this kind of stuff and this kind of torture and murder for 8 years. If you go back again to 2014, you have the burning alive of pro-Russian protesters in Odessa, and the I can never remember the city where she's referred to the Madonna of some city where it's a mother, she's dead with her legs blown off holding her dead baby. That was enough. That was enough of that to motivate the Russian public to support military action. So that's been happening for a long time. Now, about these guys, you have to remember that, again, why do the Ukrainians do this? What is their logic? Let's just say that we are become much more brutal in terms of people. We go back in time to South Africa. South Africa, like way back when, like, I don't know, let's 50s or something. So we're part of this boor minority that's like 15% of the population, and 85% of the population is not us. And we are faced with a challenge. What do? We have the power, but we're a very small minority. What are our options? Well, their option was some kind of apartheid where it's kind of like we're divided, but we're in the same country, whatever. Well, one option could be, well, for 15% now, let's make it so that the other 85% starts to dwindle. So their numbers dwindle. So our percent gets bigger and bigger, because you know what I mean? If you have 100 people and 15 are of one type, 85 are of another, you kill off 40 of the people in the 85 group, all of a sudden things look a lot closer, don't they? And that's essentially in a lot of ways what they're doing, because the actual like Ukrainian, like the Ukrop kind of Banderites, they do not even see the people there. They don't see them as their countrymen. They don't see them as human. They're just rats to be exterminated. So they see absolutely no problem in torturing them, much in the way that I eat meat every day, or much like in our fantasy scenario about South Africa, how I'm sure there were some voices within the Boers who were like, you know what, let's just kill them. So that's literally what they're doing. And they also want to try to, of course, terrify the Russians and this, that, and the other. Now, about why Russia doesn't do the same thing, because we actually, certain important people believe in God. But another thing with that is that Russia has certain policies that have gone on for the centuries. And the number one policy that Russia adapts that I've actually had to use in my own personal life is, if you're Russian, you immediately accept surrender. There is no toying with your meat. There is no punishment. As soon as capitulation happens, you accept it instantly. This, for probably the very first time, happened with Ivan IV, where there's a lot of hype about Ivan IV being Ivan the Terrible and all this stuff. But when he went to fight the Tatars in Ryazan, he had the choice of he defeated them, and what did he do? He accepted them into the fold. You guys are going to learn to speak Russian. You're going to pay taxes. All's forgotten. And from that point, that has been Russian policy. And you can even see that during World War II, how the Russians didn't exterminate the Germans. They just sort of Sovietized them, communistized them, but they didn't really do much to them. The soldiers that were stuck in Russia had to do forced labor for 5 years, and then they were allowed to stay. They were allowed to stay if they wanted. And a lot of them got married to local women, and they built lives here, which is unbelievable. So if that's also part of the policy, whereas in Russia, Russians, because remember, during the Russian Revolution, there were a lot of non-Russian people involved in that. So if we sort of exclude the Russian Revolution, Russia has a very strict, we don't do that. We don't use torture. That's not the way we do things. That's not part of the plan. It violates orthodoxy. Of course, orthodoxy allows for a lot of things that someone might consider brutal, as in war. You know what I mean? But yeah. Your second question?
Yeah, my second question, Tim, is how is Putin's position there? Is it safe, or is there any other political parties rising to the fore that are challenging him? And what does the man on the street think of Putin at the moment?
Okay, well, that's easy. There have been two moments where Putin took a very drastic drop in his popularity ratings. The first one was during these pension reforms. As Americans, we call it Social Security reforms. I think in Ireland, you guys also use the term pension, but who knows? That's not super important. But basically, your old age money, that they raised the age by like 5 years. They didn't raise the amount that anyone's getting. And his popularity rating dropped about 10 points. And when this whole stuff in Ukraine started, and it became sort of visible that Russians are being murdered, and the Kremlin can't do anything about it, his popularity went down a lot. And when this started, the special military operation, to be honest, it was probably one of the few wars in history that the overwhelming majority of the public asked for, because they wanted something to get done. And, well, that's it. So Putin is extremely popular. He is not a cult of personality, though. He's not like a Stalin type. He's not like some sort of that kind. In fact, Putin doesn't like write books or anything. There is no like little red or little green book. The little green book by Gaddafi, the little red book by Mao. He doesn't have his own little book. In fact, he is anti-ideological in a way. He's known for his pragmatism. And pragmatism generally clashes with ideology. So yeah, but I would say he's extremely popular, and the overwhelming majority of the country is on his side. It's just the problem is that people don't really understand. Okay, why is this taking so long? Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? There's a little bit of confusion from the public because Russia is shit at PR. Russia does PR like shit. It also explains to its population in terrible terms how things are. So, I mean, are things perfect? Does every last person in the country love him? No, but does the overwhelming majority love him? Does he have insane popularity ratings that no American president in our lifetimes has ever even come close to? Legit popularity ratings. He's got them. And that's the key to the future. If you want to live in an independent country in this multipolar world, you have to be insanely popular. You have to be Maduro in Venezuela, who was able to, when they were threatening, to do like some kind of Maidan revolution there and support, oh my God, what was his name? The other guy. Oh no. Oh, I can't remember his name. The guy that Washington said was the actual president of Venezuela. Maduro got 60,000 people to put on red T-shirts and walk in the streets and knock the other side out. Okay? He's popular enough where he can tell people, especially Venezuelan hillbillies, guys, you may not have a gun, you may not even have a knife, but come out there with your fists and defend me. We're doing this thing. And 60,000 people showed up. 40,000 neo-Nazis took over Kiev, so even more than that. That's where you need someone like Viktor Orban, who for a long time kind of played it cool with the EU and is now like, no, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. You want to know why he can do whatever the hell he wants? Because they can't color revolution him. He's too damn popular. And that's why if you want to have a country that pursues an independent sort of path, the national leader guy has to be that Putin or Maduro or Orban. And trust me, Maduro has some flaws. There are some problems in Venezuela that need to be resolved, and I wish he was fixing them, but he's not. But c'est la vie. You need to have a strong national leader that people believe in, and they can't color revolution you, and you can try to pursue an independent course of action, even under tough circumstances. And that's why especially this whole one of our democratic ideas of, well, let's just have the president change every 4 years because that makes the system fairer or not bad. It kind of just makes the system weaker. So going forward, I think we need more of these populist long-term leaders in order to actually get stuff done. Putin being one of these types. So, yeah, did that answer your question, or did I just go off on a side tangent? Excuse me.
No, that's Tim. You get 10 out of 10 for that question because
all right, well, there we go.
Completely. Right. That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, and forgive the noise. I'm drinking. I recently hurt my throat, so I'm trying to drink a lot while we're talking, so I don't re-damage it.
Anyone else have any questions there, folks?
Wow, there's a lot of people listening and no one has a question. No! Oh, wait, I see someone, Melissa. Talk to Melissa.
El Macarachi there first, then it.
Oh, all right. Got someone else too. Good.
How are you doing, Tim?
Hi there.
Just a quick question for you. Or, well, maybe you can give some advice. So we have nationalists, well, quote-unquote nationalists in this country who look at the Yukon Nazi nationalists and Bandera, and they would say all the stories we hear about them is just Russian propaganda. They're just defending Ukraine from invaders. And, murder, rape, and torture, that's just part of war. So would you like to address those people?
Well, war is something that sort of, oh boy, this is going to be a big one. War is something that's inherent to human beings. There's a lot of things that are inherent to human beings. Okay. And there's a certain way we do things. Remember, how did our ancestors eat 5,000 years ago? Whatever they had, put it in their hand, shove it in their mouth. And now we have this whole fancy fork, knife, and spoon, or chopsticks, depending. These very fancy ways to take something very visceral and primitive and sort of bring it to a kind of respectability. Obviously, our ancient ancestors that were vastly less human, They kind of did their business wherever they needed to, right? And now we have this wonderful thing called the toilet, and you go in this little room and you close the door, and all the bad stuff magically vanishes, and you can wash your hands with soap. It's amazing. Again, and also human beings, our sexual desires are pretty visceral as well, and we also kind of have found systems to make that more respectable too. And I think that goes to everything, because that argument then is sort of like, well, because I guess it doesn't really matter. Why not just shit on the floor? Or why not just eat like a dog? If we're going to be proud of us, if you're going to be proud of being Irish, then you have to have standards. What does it mean? This is a question you guys have to answer. I can't do it for you. But what does it mean to be Russian? It meant that when, for example, that when Stalin's, one of his sons, this is more of a legend. I don't know how true it is, but the legend is what matters. When one of Stalin's actual sons or relatives was captured by the Nazis assumed that he'd give them anything to get his kid back. And he just said, no, treat him like anyone else. Got to be better than your enemy. Or stuff like the other like weird legends about Stalin, about how his will had 5 things in it. One of them was a used pair of boots. Like this kind of stuff where you have to have these legends, this idea of who you are, and you have to have standards of, we don't do this, we're better. And it's sort of like, well, if you could just do anything, what are you defending? What Ireland are you actually defending? You know what I mean? Because if they're defending especially a Catholic Ireland, well, that Catholicism comes with a certain set of rules. So that also means that they're defending, only sex in marriage, sex between a man and a woman, no divorce. Kind of understand that there's this guy called the Pope, and he is infallible. There's a lot of stuff, mixed up with that. Maybe they're pagans or something. Because again, remember, when you're pagan, you just make up anything. Because all the information about how paganism actually worked was lost. So that's why people love it, because you can just make up whatever you want. But I mean, that's it. Sort of, it's like, ask them, why don't you just shit on the floor? Like and also, what Ireland are you defending? If you're gonna go then to, I don't know. Well, first off, I don't know who are the enemies of Ireland. I guess you could say maybe migrants. Well, it's like one of the simple things you could do is just make life uncomfortable and people leave. But if you guys were to go on some sort of crusade to like slaughter everyone who isn't Irish, you then are going to fall into this other weird thing of who's Irish, which is the same thing the Germans got into. And then they're going to have to come up with a system of determining who's Irish and who isn't. And unfortunately, it's not that simple. So if we go back to that rock group, Thin Lizzy from 70s, lead singer, real famous. They're from Ireland, I'm pretty sure. Half black, half white. So is he dead or not? Is he half Irish or is he half black? And then that's where the goofiness of eugenics comes in. If it's like, well, if you're on your maternal side, if your grandfather was a Hindu, then that means you have to die. And it just doesn't make sense. If they really want to fight for a more nationalist Ireland, they need to make sure that everyone gets on the page of like, okay, these are our Irish beliefs. This is especially maybe our Irish religion. This is our Irish way of doing things. And if you don't like it, get the fuck out, or we'll make life miserable for you. That's civil. That's aggressive. That is, I guess you could say, nationalist. But it's not murderous, and it's not, bringing Ireland down. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think really. I think Al's talking about be a very fringe element now. I don't know too many people who have bloodlust now, but
well, of course, dude. I was referring to the more fringe element, but all this nationalist thinking, there's certain schools of thought about how people sort of see the world, and all these nationalists, they all sort of do the same things, man. You just change Ireland to France or like Ethiopia or China or wherever, and their mindset and their flaws are exactly the same. You just change the wording around. Like we even did that earlier in this interview, talking about how the Zionists behave exactly like the Nazis of World War II. They're extremely, extremely in line with their philosophy because it's the same type of philosophy. You just change the names of stuff.
I agree 100%. Take one more question there. Wild superfoods.
Ooh, superfoods. Delicious. Hello?
I think he's gone, Gav.
Oh, no. Well, I saw someone with their hand up down there. I'm a curious bloke. So I see there's one blue icon. I think that Melissa girl got angry. She's not here anymore. She was morally hurt by you not selecting her. So.
Your question there, William.
Yeah, I didn't hear the whole interview there, Tim. Very interesting, the perspective from the other side, as the saying goes, and I would agree with a lot of what Putin's doing. He's defending his people who are living in Ukraine. You know what I mean? And they've been crying out in the whole 8 years from 2014, but I think we need to be turned saying, putting all politics aside, putting all religion, if you want to call it that, aside, and just be looking at each other as individual human beings, all equal, all, made in the image of God, your creator. Do you know what I mean, Tim? And just have human compassion for each other. Now, there is them people who are trying to force their ideology. They're trying to, imply their views of what they think the world should be, i.e. New World Order, whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? They are being controlled by the enemy of humanity itself. You know what I mean? And this is why there is the wars in the world, and has been going on for centuries and centuries, So we need to get back to basics, and we need to put all this stuff to the side. There's people here have good moral views, even in politics, and they need to get rid of this them and us thing, and bring people in who are going to unite the people together and have the people looking out for each other's interests at heart on a daily basis. If you see a need, go and, provide for it, in whatever way you can. Like, just having basic humanity and looking after each other, and having good morals, and all
Tim,
this stuff. Putin's 100%.
No, I actually got it. I think, guys, I can respond right now to William. He made some points that, William, please forgive me that I'm going to kind of pick apart what you said. This isn't to be a jerk. This isn't to, because I'll put it this way. What you said touched my heart, but the problem is that there's some problems. Okay, first off, you said, and also, if you thought I was writing like a message to my buddies, if you heard the keyboard clicking, that's because I was taking some notes on what he said. Now, one thing he said was get rid of us versus them. Unfortunately, this goes back to what I mentioned about tribalism. We can't. Human beings are not capable of getting rid of us versus them. We always have the people who speak our language versus those who don't, people who look like us versus people who don't, people who behave different from us or behave similar to us. Unfortunately, the tribalist mindset, the tribal mindset of human beings is unconquerable. We will always be divided into various different groups. That's what a lot of this whole thing about transgenderism is about. It's about trying to eliminate this dividing, qualifying factor of gender. That to be truly liberal, you have to be free from every form of collective identity, including your gender. Well, no. So apparently, you might sound good to get rid of us versus them, but unfortunately that is in direct conflict with human nature. And it would be kind of like me saying, oh, God, wouldn't it be great if there was no sex? If just we were sort of just rid of it, because, it causes a lot of problems. It's so frustrating. What if people just sort of multiplied on the street? Well, unfortunately, that's not to be. So that was point number one. Point number two is to view each other as human. And this also ties into tribalism, where unfortunately we cannot. It's kind of like this question of, it's like, do Black lives matter? Do all lives matter? Human beings literally cannot have all lives matter. There's someone suffering right now because of some hurricane or some drought or some problem somewhere in the world. all lives can't matter to us. Our brains are not that grand. We are not godlike beings. We simply cannot have a global compassion, a global universal compassion for everyone, where our minds are just too busy. We're too focused on ourselves, and there are too many things that we just can't possibly concentrate on them. Furthermore, again, going back to tribalism, everything that's different from us is always going to be kind of a threat, and that's when our compassion vanishes. That's also part of human nature. Another one is, why are there wars? Because we're being fought into them. Again, I think war is a bit of a human nature, but we can definitely, much like a lot of other things, problems in life, there could either be more murder or less murder. There could be more theft or less theft. Getting rid of the concept of theft is not going to go away, as is getting rid of the concept of war, but we can certainly have less wars. And that's why I'm an advocate for the multipolar world theory, because I believe that theory will provide less war. It won't eliminate war, but it'll definitely keep war to hopefully a nice minimum, and everyone will be happy. So I'm sorry, William, I don't mean to be a dick or an ass. That's not the objective here. But what you said, again, it's things that are really packed with a lot of powerful emotions, but they don't meet up with political realities. Maybe one more question. I see a certain person has their hand raised here. Oh, one more. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Hello.
Thank you very much, Les. Hi, Tim. Sorry, it's fantastic stream, and thank you for sharing.
I'm doing what I do every day, so thank you.
Just joined your channel, so looking forward to hearing some of those interviews you have done. Just to ask you, Ursula over there in the EU, that's calling us all in, has recently, just in the last 2 weeks, basically called in EU states for military camps in their own countries. And unfortunately, one of our own ministers has announced only a week ago that Ireland will now have, by mid-November, Ukraine military camps here in Ireland. So at the moment, they're buying up large manors, lots of land, convents with lots of land, and I do believe these will be turned into these Ukraine military camps, they're calling them. But why should we have Ukraine military camps here? We were told it was all women and children, refugees, which we know now they're not. There's actually over 40% all single fighting age men. So we are literally, when you were saying there that there's quite a lot of Georgians fighting in Ukraine at the moment, we are being literally flooded with international migrants from Georgia and lots of different areas here. And what would your thoughts be on it? I believe that, Ireland obviously want to join NATO, but my concern, and just to get your maybe feedback on it, is that they're going to train these people here in our country, Georgians, and a lot of criminals in here, and that they're going to fight, they're going to use them against us, our own people, at some stage. And, because I don't think they'll be sending them all back over. Why are they sending them over to Ireland to train?
And first off, thank you very much for listening to me. Sometimes I always feel like I say a lot, but people don't listen. For listening to me what I mentioned about Georgia, because in a lot of ways, these camps are probably going to be filled with everyone from the former Soviet Union with a gripe against Russia, no matter where they are. Because as we've seen, the majority of Chechens are very happy being a part of Russia. In fact, many of them have given their lives to do so. But there's that percent who are not. And that would apply to Georgians. That could apply to people from Armenia as well, maybe some Azerbaijanis. Definitely people from the Baltic states, that's for sure. There's probably some Moldovan extremists who absolutely hate Russia. That's the president. Well, she's not extremist, but she certainly hates Russia. So anyways, it's probably going to be a conglomerate or a broad contingent of everyone from the former Soviet Union with a gripe against Russia, who ironically will speak Russian with each other. That's the real irony of this all. But anyways, what is their objective? Now, one of these theories is more my own. One of them is not. The one that is not my own is that, yes, there's a sort of thing that a belief among certain pro-Russian analysts that essentially these camps are going to be used as some sort of Operation Gladio 2.0, where they're going to take these very extreme people, they're going to put them all over Europe, and they're going to be able to sort of do with them what they want. And in a lot of ways, this newfound, absolutely brutal, sadistic mentality can be turned up on your populations at any time. Okay, these people can be turned against you at any moment because of their bizarro ideology. But also, probably one of the simplest things is they might be preparing for essentially an eternal war against Russia, another sort of like very long Cold War where they're going to be able to sort of have camps to build fighters to sort of fight Russia over a very long term. You know what I mean? Where if the FSB has been having to deal with like terrorist plots and foiling them that have been happening in Russia recently, then who knows? They might have plenty of plots being lined up for the next 10 years. You see what I mean? So, yeah, that's kind of where I think. I think it's more that they're going to throw this at Russia over the long term. But could they be used against you guys? Maybe. It's not outside the realm of possibility, that's for darn sure.
Thanks, Tim. You're a wealth of information, and you're really generous with your time and everything. So thanks a million for coming on. And
well, hey, if you could hook me up, if you were recording this, send me the recording. If you weren't recording this, then sad face.
We will indeed. We'll definitely send it on to you.
All right, much appreciated.
No hassle, but thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Take care, everyone.
Back.
Oh,
and
sure,
please come
sure.
back, Tim.
Just give me a